Okay. There was a little quiet lull there, and it felt like it was an indicator for us to get started. And so I got the directions to come up from. Welcome to Tech Alliance. I'm the CEO here at Tech Alliance. My name is Christina Fox, and I see a few new faces in the room that I haven't seen before. So welcome if this is your first time here. We certainly have a deep sense of gratitude and respect for this land, the waters, and resources protected by Indigenous people for centuries. And I want to acknowledge that this is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and the Attawandaron, and honoring all the original peoples of Turtle Island. TechAlliance remains committed to working alongside allies and Indigenous-led businesses to advance prosperity for the region's First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. I'm going old school with paper and it requires me to lick my finger, which is probably gross for everybody. But it is what it is. So, of course, here at Tech Alliance, we empower world-class ventures and fuel growth in Canada's innovation economy. And as the podium of record for technology, we provide entrepreneurs and ventures at all stages with professional development, story amplification, mentorship, coaching, connections, and access to capital, customers, and talent to ensure that the innovative economic growth remains prosperous here in Southwestern Ontario. And it means that we have a team of venture growth advisors that can support you as you face opportunities and challenges with your growth. And additionally, our advocacy efforts highlight the most promising startups and fastest growing unicorns. Focused right now, that advocacy is focused a little bit right now on the uncertainty that we still continue to face with the changes that we're seeing across North America and around the world as it relates to trade and tariff. But as we know, that with every challenge comes an opportunity, and that opportunity is to take Canada to the rest of the world. And so we're keen to see more of that happening from this region. There's so many reasons to be an Alliance member with us, like amplifying your story by sending your press releases to us so we can amplify them across our local and national media contacts. On social media, feel free to DM us your any activities that you've got that you want us to amplify and repost. Part of what we do is to make it simple for you to catch the attention of others. And I think you'll find there's quite a bit more of that to come today with this masterclass. Before we get started with the masterclass about public relations, I'm going to brag a little bit because why not when we have even an audience of this size that is deeply interested in the things that are happening in this community. So a couple of weeks ago, London actually earned recognition on Startup Blink's 2025 Global Index. And what we're excited about is that we actually moved up the ranking by 165 spots, with London nationally moving from 16th to 12th. And that's as a result of this vibrant, thriving tech community powered by your innovation and your involvement. So on that, let's give ourselves a round of applause. And I love the whoop. That's sort of a let's go. So clearly, this ranking reflects the massive momentum in London's tech and innovation ecosystem, driven by ambitious founders and visionary industry leaders, collaborative public and private partnerships, and sustained support from champions. And all that means you. This is not by accident. We know that in London, Ontario, and across Southwestern Ontario, it is as a result of the risk that you take and putting everything on the line for your venture, no matter what stage you're at. If you're a tech talent in a larger corporation, it's the work that you're doing that's calling attention to this region. That's our doorbell. And it's the ways that we operate within this ecosystem to be less modest and more braggadocious. And that's why I was going to take that opportunity to go right off script and talk about it. But if you're new here, welcome. As far as orientation, feel free to use the back door to exit to the hallway. There's a restroom right across the hallway as well through the kitchen. If you need to use the restroom, if you need to take a phone call, we know you're all busy people. Feel free to head out that back door and take some space to do that. And I know that we will have questions at the end. I think you're going to find that this is a power-packed presentation and your brain is going to be full with lots and lots and lots of goodness. We'll do the best we can to have questions. If not, I know that our speakers are going to share some contact information. We know that bringing your vision to reality is certainly hard work, and no founder, innovator, or professional in this room is unaware of that. So for every business, we also know that the focus is growth. And growth comes from a lot of different ways, and public relations is one of the most powerful tools in the Founders Toolkit. And if you don't know that now or aren't a believer, you're going to certainly know that as you depart today. So today we're going to have two geniuses from one of Canada's leading data-driven public relations companies that represents change makers and innovators in technology. It's Category Communications. And so they're going to cover strategies to build long-term visibility in a competitive market, fundamentals for public relations to help you craft a compelling story, and build your narrative to own your category in the place that your company sits in or the categories that you're planning to enter in. So let me introduce our guests, both Rachael and Chantel. I have met through other women who are flexing their muscles across this region through to the GTA, I would say actually up and down that innovation corridor. And by virtue of that connection, I find that the network of innovators and change makers is so powerful, and the space that we create for one another is so much the same. And so I'm super duper excited that they're here as supporters of Polaris and working with our team, even on our own public relations output and how we actually brag a little bit about ourselves while showcasing shining light on you. So it's really my pleasure to have you here in our space today. And I can't wait to spend some time with you next week. But more officially, Chantel is the co-founder of Category Communications, a seasoned PR leader with over a decade of experience across real estate, retail, and tech. In that category, Chantel helps future-focused companies from global A-list brands like Reddit and Snapchat to high-growth startups, gaining visibility through strategic storytelling. And with roots in experiential marketing and passion for industry advancement, she also serves on the board of Canadian Public Relations Society, supporting collaboration and emerging PR talent. Please join me in welcoming Chantel. And then you can stand here while I officially do Rachael. So also joining us is Rachael D'Amore, who's the Senior Director of Category Communications and a highly experienced PR professional with a strong background in Canadian journalism, having reported for major outlets like CP24, CTV, and Vice. And in her current role, Rachael leads strategic campaigns for clients in tech, AI, and sustainability. She's also a passionate industry mentor, sharing her expertise at events like Elevate Festival and serving as a Radio, Television, Digital News Association Awards judge. Please join me in welcoming Rachael. And with that, I wanted to call out one other VIP that we have joining us virtually today, I suppose in spirit, and it's our friends at Robertson Hall Insurance, our Masterclass series sponsor. For those of you who have joined us at other Masterclasses, you will have met Erica McTavish, and she's a strong, again, woman flexing her presence in this space and bringing incredible value to companies that are growing and scaling and establishing and maturing. And so with that, I'm going to pass the floor over to the both of you, and I'm going to sit in the front row and be a total geek and take notes. I'm actually going to whip over and grab my phone, take notes on it, and I will join you, but you get started.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that intro. I don't know how we can do that justice, but maybe we'll give our little spiel on who we are. So as Christina mentioned, I'm Chantel. I'm one of the co-founders at Category. I'm actually originally from London, Ontario. So thank you everyone for coming out. Love to see London have a spotlight in the tech community. And so that's really what we work with the TechAlliance team on as well. So a bit about my background. I'm from London, went to university here, went out west as every good Ontarian does, started as a mid-size agency out there. Actually started my experience in experiential marketing. Started a mid-size agency, moved back to Toronto, which is where I met Rachael, and then we broke off and started our own shop. So we are a boutique agency. We specialize in technology, real estate, and finance clients. So have a team of about 9 now, and it's been about a year and a half. So it's been an amazing journey. I'm very excited to chat to you guys about PR strategy, and thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah, hard to follow that intro already. But I was born, raised in Windsor, so I do know this belt. I'm a further south belt, but came to Toronto to study journalism, spent 10 years doing that, reported on everything that you can think of, really was not a beat reporter, a general assignment reporter, and that has kind of followed me into PR, and I've touched many different companies and many different industries, and that's kind of always the way I've liked it. One day got tired of journalism, and this one over here said, why don't you come to the dark side? And so here I am, 5 years later, really supporting a ton of startups, scale-ups, you name it, with a specific passion in tech and AI and sustainability. So really excited to show you what we've got.
Okay, we will get into this deeper, but I want to just give an overview of what we do at Category Communications. So really our bread and butter is storytelling. And so we do that through multiple channels. What a lot of our clients come to us for is the earned media relations side of things. We also do crisis communications. Hopefully no one in this room needs that at this stage in their company journey, but that is something that we do as well. Social media, we've actually been focusing on a lot of thought leadership on LinkedIn specifically for CEOs and founders. And then we do influencer marketing. That can look like a variety of different ways, and then events as well. So I started my career in experiential marketing. Events is a great way to do maybe a media press event or maybe more of a consumer side of things. So that's just a little scope of kind of what we do at Category. Yeah.
And so we've helped a ton of different companies. As you can see here, this is just a snippet, pre-seed founders, scale-ups, national organizations in many, many different ways. You know, we take a lot of pride of working with founders who want to be change makers in their industries, not just launch a product every other day. And that really matters to us from a PR perspective because that's where credibility is built. So this is just a small snippet of some of the companies that we've worked with, but you know, whether that be a company wanting to share more personal finance tips and how that brings them back to the solution that they're offering with their platform, or with big events like Elevate and Toronto Tech Week next week we'll be supporting with, bringing media on site so they can tell comprehensive stories and really get the brand out there. We really span across industries and verticals and bring different ways to bring different companies to tell different stories. And us. Okay, so here's a couple of things that we've done lately. And I think this is probably going to be the most interesting for you guys. There's a couple different ways we'll get into what exactly it means to do PR. What are those tactics? Do they apply to me? Some will, some won't. But the biggest thing that we've seen as of lately is tariff expert commentary. And so one of the ways to get involved in the news is to have something to say about something that's already going on, whether that's a macroeconomic trend, something that's happening in a particular region. And so this client in particular, AutoZen, which is like a Vancouver-based online car dealership, you know, they had an expert to talk about those auto tariffs, and that changes really rapidly. And that makes you an asset to journalists, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get engaged in those conversations. But we also do the tried and true things. So raise announcements, rebrands, those things that really can become foundational moments for companies and really where you can start to think about kickstarting your PR. So one of our clients in prop tech went from doormat to own right. How do we make that change? How do we make that splash? How do we make sure that it's clear to the customers going forward? And then data surveys is a big one for us. I think we're doing a data survey every other week because media love data. It's one thing to say something about your company. It's one thing to say that you're solving a solution, solving a problem. Well, what is the problem? Who's facing it? How bad is it? Data will tell you that and help you tell that story. So that's a lot of the work we do so far. So enough about us for now, but here's a quick agenda of what we'll run through today. We'll move through story building, you know, where you can start, and that might look different to each and every one of you, to strategy and execution, just so you can understand a little bit about the why and then the how. And then we'll share some real world case studies of our clients today so you can get a full picture of how that comes to life.
Awesome. Okay, we will get into PR 101. So if you don't know what PR is, that is okay. I feel like I've been working in the industry for a decade and I still go home and my dad's like, Shan, how are those ad sales going? I'm like, I don't sell ads. That's not what I do. Thank you so much for, but it is really, you know, I think that this quote here is, you know, advertising is saying you're good, where PR is other people telling people you're good. So it is really, you'll hear us talk a lot about third-party credibility, but really what PR is the strategic practice of managing how a brand, individual, organization is perceived by the public. So that's done through storytelling, through earned media, through meaningful relationship with stakeholders. Talking about third-party credibility, Bill Gates have really done us a solid on this one. So he said, if I was down to my last dollar, I would spend it on PR. So the reason why that is PR is not just about press releases. It's not just about getting into the news. It is really about building trust, building credibility, authority, and also awareness. So really PR is part of your marketing toolkit. It is a top of funnel awareness side of things, but it gives you that credibility and trust through other businesses, consumers, whatever it may be of who your audience actually is. So really why you guys should care. PR helps attract investors. It also brings in top talent. It also opens up doors if you're really early stage. And then it helps drive SEO and AI search. So that is something that is super important in our industry right now. I'm sure all of you guys are talking about AI. Our clients are as well. We represent a few AI companies, and it's definitely a topic of conversation of people are going less to Google now and more to AI. So, why PR matters in that AI search is that it is looking, anytime that you are using ChatGPT, it is looking for credible sources to pull that information from. So if you are continually mentioned in the media, whether it be your founder story, about your company, your bio somewhere, it is going to start to pull facts from that. So an example of, if you were to put in like, what are the top prop tech companies in Canada? It'll take sources, and you can see it from here on what other credible media sources have said that. So when you have strong PR, you have a strong digital footprint, and you're going to show up more in AI search. Okay, so where to start with your PR? How many people here are already announced, kind of out? Have you launched the company, or you're more recent? Okay, great. Awesome. Even when I started my own business, I think that we're like, oh, I have to get out there and actually share my story. I usually like being behind the scenes, but really the most powerful story that you are going to go out with when you're launching your company, when you're sharing your story, is your founder story. Like, yeah, that is your most powerful PR tactic that you can really share. It feels cringe. You have to embrace the cringe, truly. If I can share anything, it's that get out there, share your story as much as possible, and start building that.
And embracing the cringe where it feels genuine. So we call it our founder story formula. And really the story is a credibility tool. So the investors, the press, your future hires, they want to know not only the why, but the why you, right? And so answering that in the terms of your origin story is going to be the most impactful way to do that. One that feels real too, not rehearsed. Often when we're media training founders, we're saying, stick to your key messages, but don't be a corporate robot. And that's the same thing that you should think about your founding story. And so, you don't need to have $1 million ambition. You don't need to have you have to have a clear reason why and why it matters. And that's the kind of questions a journalist will ask as well, right? When they're getting tons of sources in their inbox, they're going to want to know that you're the right person with the experience or the lived experience and the right background to be talking on a subject or to be sharing your story. So, thinking about what was the personal pain point that made you say, I need to fix this? What inspired that? What was it that needed a fix? And then think about who you're doing it for. Is it a macroeconomic issue that you're addressing? Are you, supporting a specific segment of the Canadian economy? Maybe that's one that you're a part of. And so it's that lived experience that'll only help your origin story as well. And then tie that to your journey. How did you get here? What was it like building it? And what was the solution? What was the conclusion that you came to that brought you to your company? And what's the vision that you want that to be known and heard for? That's kind of the best formula to get your origin story together. And we have a perfect example of it that I love to be talking about. Anybody know Erin Burry? Lots of nods. Okay, so maybe I've told this story or someone's told this story, and so you've heard her story, but she's our favorite example because we've worked with Erin for many, many years, but she started her PR journey from the very, very beginning She actually started a tech PR company herself, but was led to Willful from the start. So her husband's uncle passed away without a will, caused a ton of confusion, a ton of family stress as well, while the family should be grieving and should not be worrying about those kinds of things. And she immediately knew something was broken. So, that's where that origin story started for her. And then she started to think about, well, who, right? What is the data point that sort of backs up? It's not just me experiencing that. It's not just, Erin's husband's uncle who had faced this. It ended up being over half of Canadian adults not having a will and can be, finding themselves in that situation at some point or another. And so she set out to solve it, right? And that brought her to her journey. She left that career in PR. Good for her. She ended up, launching the company with her husband in a very regulated space, right? So that's part of the challenge is how did she get through some of that regulation? And how did she start to get trust from Canadians? Up until this point, there wasn't anything else for you to get your will. You sat in a lawyer's office. You dealt with tons of documents. You couldn't just go online and do it in 20 minutes, right? So that's what brought her to the solution. And then ultimately the vision, which is to not only destigmatize what has happened with conversations around death, which we all like to and naturally want to avoid, but need to have. And she's done that through PR. She's done that really from the very beginning to the point that now she's been on every single TV broadcast, television show that you can think of, talking about personal finance, bringing it back to Willful, why it matters when it comes to family financial planning, and to the point she's even a Globe Advisor columnist at this point. And so really starting early with your origin story can become that really incredible thread that leads you to a very successful PR journey. So where to start? So your founder story is just one place to start. It's obviously your first PR asset. Knowing your why, I think, is the most important part of that founder's story. But ultimately, PR is something for you not to do after you've quote unquote made it, right? I know many of us are waiting for that moment to make it. PR is going to help you get there. And so, it's something that you can think about in a couple different ways, depending on the stage that you're at in your company. Maybe it is your founder story. Maybe it's that cultural hook or trend, right? So, tariffs is one example that we use. How do you capitalize on something that's going on that you can be a solution to the problem for, and start to talk about it and become an expert in that space and build your credibility off of something that Canadians or the general public are already focused on. Another example that we've seen really work well was the SEBA repayment loans from last year with the COVID days. A lot of small business startups really found an opportunity to say, we can help with this, but we also know a lot has gone wrong. How can we become that expert? And that's how you can sort of start on that PR moment. A product solving a timely problem. So it's one thing to have a product, but what is that thing that you're solving that relates to an issue that everybody's talking about today? We used to work with a company that had some support for immigrants coming to Canada, a tech platform that made it a lot easier at this point in Canada to help them get here. And so that was some way to hook it to a timely trend. Fundraise and pre-fundraising. So maybe you want to launch or have a raise. These are totally great moments for you to start thinking about a really special way to start PR. Okay. So how do you start putting pen to paper?
Sure. Yeah. And I would say an important note in terms of like when to start PR. Also, a good thing to remember is like PR is not a turn the taps on, turn the taps off. Oftentimes, you'll even see in the Erin Burry example, she invests in PR all the time. And so, yes, you can go out with a specific announcement. You also don't need to be pitching media every day. You're not going to have enough news for that. But there is different ways that you can be sharing your stories on different channels that are really important to just continue that on. So in terms of where to start with PR, is definitely knowing your audience first. So where are they? What are they reading? What influences them? Oftentimes clients will come to us and say, we want to be in the front page of the Globe and Mail, but then we actually get them into a trade publication and they've seen more website traffic or client inquiries because of that. So it's really important to understand like what where's my audience reading? And then how can I share my story on that platform? Media PR is really, and especially media relations, is all about relationships. So you never want it to feel very transactional. You want to start building those relationships early. So engage with them on Twitter, X, I still call it Twitter, LinkedIn, have informal coffee chats, understand, what are they writing about? How does your story actually fit into that? And be really helpful. You always want to share value over just sharing your company news. So, if we can give you a takeaway from today is, look at your industry. What are some of those industry publications or reporters that are writing on maybe your competitors or that you would want them to write about you on, and start following those reporters. So read their work, understand their beats, like follow them on LinkedIn or X, and then send them a DM. I think that you shouldn't be scared of reporters. We're not. And just start to build those relationships really early.
Add to, I think Twitter was a really big one back in the day. Back in my day, it was a big one where you could find journalists, understand what they were reporting on. They would tell you what they were reporting on. LinkedIn is major for this now. So if you know a journalist that is in your beat and would be the perfect person to tell your story, add them on LinkedIn. 9 out of 10 times, you're going to see a call out from them that will give you a better understanding of what they're covering and could be your first way in to be speaking with that journalist, offering your expertise or introducing them to your company. So LinkedIn is really the way to go to start some of those, like a first initial touch points.
And even sharing your own founder story on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is definitely the modern day business card. And that is, we often see even in our clients today, they're very vocal on LinkedIn. They'll actually have journalists either quoting them in articles or reaching out to them from what they post on LinkedIn. So we can get into LinkedIn a little bit further, but it's definitely a great forum for that. So looking at, how to build your PR strategy. So this is, you can either take a DIY approach or hire a comms person, hire an agency. But really what you want to go into that relationship with is, what is your objective? So what are you trying to achieve? Do you want more awareness? Is it, you want to build your reputation? Everyone wants sales for sure. That's always the main key and why we're here. But then again, understand who your audience is and who you're actually trying to reach. Are you looking to reach the media? Are you looking to get more investors? Like, that approach is going to be very different than talking to an end user. Key messages. So this is very important. I think any good PR person is going to build out a key messaging document for you. You as a founder or CEO, it's very important to pick those 3 key messages about your company, continue to practice them. So when we work with a new client, we'll build out a key messaging document. We always say, we're singing from the same song sheet. How you're describing your company on your website versus how you're talking about yourself in interviews or how it's described in your social media channel should really all be consistent. And so having those key messages and going into interviews or how you're telling your story and just continuing to drive that home is very, very important. And then looking at the channels and tactics. So we'll give you some things to consider on how to reach them, but look at media, social, events, any own content that you can do, making sure that when you are getting coverage, you're actually amplifying that on your channels as well. And then what are your story angles? So we'll always build out what we call a story matrix. So what you want to think about is, what is the product roadmap that you have coming up? Do you have a new big hire that you're wanting to share? Are you doing a raise announcement? Whatever that may be in the next 6 months, you want to start to map that out. It's also very important to think about the timelines of the season, right? So there is a editorial calendar for everything. I would say if you're in the prop tech space, you're going to be talking about the spring real estate market and the fall real estate market at key times. And so you're making sure that you're building out those proactive story ideas that make sense for the timeline in the season that you're in. And then measurement. So this is always a big topic of discussion in the PR industry, is that how do you define success? So again, PR is high level awareness. So we often measure success via the number of media hits, the public impressions that we get from that, the reach, if we saw website traffic, if you have a direct link. I mean, always the gold star is that they are putting in backlinks to the article. That also helps your SEO. but that is not always guaranteed because you're not paying for that story. So whenever they do that, you can see a website, increase. We've also had clients on broadcast, and sometimes they'll see direct traffic from that broadcast segment. So usually it's really, judging. I think even in the PR industry, anytime someone says, I saw you on Global and that's why I came into, like, that's a gold star for us, because you can sometimes not have that same visibility and traffic. Awesome. Okay, so PR tactics to consider. So PR is not just a press release. It is multiple different tactics that you can take over the course. And again, it's not a turn the taps on, turn the taps off. It is a long-term investment. So what we often do is a lot of proactive media relations. So that's exactly what I was explaining in terms of the story matrix of what do you have coming up, what's your product roadmap, what kind of news do you want to share. How that is done is via press releases, via targeted pitching. Only use press releases for significant announcements. That is really important. Oftentimes journalists are very busy. They want a short pitch. You want to make sure that you are pitching them the right beat. So you can do that in funding announcements, launches, any milestones. And then reactive pitching and newsjacking. So our team is very good at this. They're a team of ex-journalists. They are monitoring the news every day on what is happening. A perfect example of this is the tariffs. Like, that took over our life for probably about a month. It's a little bit slowed down now. But how can we look at the experts that we have and comment on how this is impacting the bigger society, our clients, our industries, our businesses. So reacting to trends or what's happening currently does have a good conversion in terms of coverage. And then thought leadership. Oftentimes this is much of a buzzword in PR. How this can look is opinion, not editorials. So if you have a very, very strong POV on a certain subject or problem that's happening, you can draft an opinion editorial and submit that to like a Globe and Mail, to a industry article, whatever it may be. You can also ask to contribute guest articles too. Sometimes media publications will take that because they are low on resources. And then speaking opportunities is a really good thing, doing some awards and getting recognition. Data reports is something that we do all the time. And so if you have own data from your company and there is interesting insights or trends that you want to put into a report and package it up, media love data. They love and they will eat that up all day. We can also do third-party polling with a survey provider on making custom questions and asking a certain audience, whatever that may be for you. And then we package it up and send that to the media. Influencer relations. So this can really look at partnering with creators or industry influencers. It doesn't need to be your fashion influencer from Instagram. We can look at, business influencers and who is influencing your industry and how can we look to engage them to actually endorse your product. Again, it goes kind of go back to the third party credibility aspect of it. And then events. So, we don't do a ton of like press conferences anymore. We actually worked with Well Health Technology. We had the Minister of Innovation and Finance come. They were announcing a big a raise and a partnership. And so, that's a point where you can actually do a press conference, but you can also do a, product demo. You can engage the community, like having them actually experience your product. You're out there speaking to them, just it does wonders and it helps drive that buzz. So when you look at building your PR toolkit, so again, you want to start with your founder story. If you don't have a bio on yourself, please draft one. That is very important. Also get a headshot. We love the good tech headshots with the brand name on the shirt. Making sure that you are, again, building out that key messaging document. What's really important, especially for tech companies, is how is your product or service different than others, and what is your unique selling point? And you want to make sure that you're continuing to drive that home. And then again, what is your top three key messages about your company, and continually say that in media interviews and everywhere else. You want to start to build that media list. So again, who is covering your competitors? Who do you want to get coverage in? Start to build that up and engage with them on social media is very important. Think about where you want to be a thought leader. So what are some of those topics that you want to be seen as an expert in, and start building your content from there. Share things on LinkedIn about it, look at where you can contribute content, and then what is your product roadmap? So this is really going to help you build out that proactive PR story matrix. Okay, raise announce. Who here has done a raise? Or is about to do a raise? Raising friends. Okay, awesome. Congrats. So this is a lot of what some clients come to us for. I'm actually currently dealing with this now. And you can either do a raise announcement as your first foray and launch into the market. So you can say, you know, company X has raised $8 million and they are solving this problem. So you really want to define what is your goal in sharing your raise? Is it to attract more investors? Is it to get key hires? Like if you're getting raise money, it's usually for personnel or different product innovation. So you want to use PR to get that awareness and publicity to attract that audience. So, or is it giving you a competitive edge, right? I think we have a company right now that is kind of knows a competitor is coming into the market and they want to share that they have raised this capital and that this is what they're doing next. So looking at that, and then always planning ahead. So a minimum of 4 weeks is usually the best results. That gives you time to define your strategy, build out your media list, put the materials together. The most important facts to have in that press release is what type of raise is it? Is it pre-seed, seed, series A? How much? You cannot go out with a raise announcement and not share how much. We have had clients come to us. Or, yeah. Yes, yes. And it has to be the accurate number too. That is also very important. Don't couple it with a grant or from something else. You have to be very transparent in what that is. And then who are your lead investors or notable investors? And what do you plan on doing with those funds? So what is your vision statement? What is going to happen next? Is it product innovation? Is it key hires? Whatever it is, that is really what the tech and business press want to know about your raise announcement. They want to know how much, who, and what is going to happen next on it.
And here are a couple examples of some that we've done recently. And I think that the one point to make, especially on raise announcements, especially if it was raised here in Canada, it's done in CAD, we have a very finite amount of media that are going to cover this or cover this thoroughly. So BetaKit is obviously number one. They are going to be the kind of outlet that is going to ask you the hard-hitting questions. So making sure that you're going in with the right denomination, making sure that you know who your investors are, and if you need to be giving breakdowns, that you're at the ready with them. They really want those details. And then depending on the size of the raise, depending on the, for the doormat one, for example, they're also rebranding. The Logic is another outlet worth pursuing. There's a few reporters there that will take raises of certain sizes. Fintech.ca as well is always one to be looking for. They love to cover Canadian companies that are raising. What you don't see up here is the Globe and Mail. And that is for a very specific reason, because there are really 2 tech reporters at the Globe and Mail who will cover raises, and you have to be a unicorn at this point in time to get coverage in the Globe and Mail on a raise. And that is just the cold, hard truth. We have heard it from Sean Silkoff more than times than we can count. So these would be your top, and also TechCrunch. If another founder comes to me and says, I want to be in TechCrunch, I said, well, are you a unicorn? If you are not, you can say goodbye to that. So consider these your top 3, publications when it comes to getting coverage for a raise. Really, they're going to be the gold standards, and tell your story in a more thoughtful way too.
And also to note, just in terms of raise announcements, the mainstream media are not going to cover it. You're not going to get on CTV London that you have raised a certain amount. There is actually merit to a local story. If you have a great founder, they often love that. But it's not going to be, headline news across it. It's usually tech, business, and trade publications that want to hear about raise announcements. Okay, so utilizing LinkedIn. So we talked about this a little bit. I think really, really important for your executive teams, founders, CEOs to be making sure that your LinkedIn is up to date and personalized. So you want to add topics that you are known for. You want to add your bio. You want to share what is the vision of your company, and just ensuring that your network is up to date. So great forum to share your thought leadership on LinkedIn, your founder journey, your POV. Oftentimes people look at LinkedIn and say, is it just a highlight reel, which is much of social media? What actually probably gets a lot of engagement is sharing your journey too. Like, it's hard to be a founder. It's hard to be a CEO. Like, what are some of those trials and tribulations that you can share in terms of learnings or what's happening in your industry? So don't feel like you just need to share the positives, just share that journey, and but understanding like who is your audience too. Again, building those media relationships and looking for call outs. So here's a couple of examples here. So Brenda Bao, she is a freelance journalist at the Globe and Mail, and she'll often do call outs. So she was looking for medium-sized companies that were to be profiled on leadership and innovation. She'll often put her email in there. Same with Vindia. She is a great resource too. She does a lot of personal finance. And so you'll often see this on, follow those journalists on LinkedIn. They'll do call outs. If it's a good fit for your company, reach out. And then amplifying your company announcements and media coverage. I think, from our side, we do all this work, you get a great piece of coverage. Who else is seeing that, right? So of course you're going to get the impressions from the publication, but how can you share it on your LinkedIn, on your website, in your newsletter, making sure that you're amplifying that. Media publications are also, they look at page views. So if that is getting more views and that's a great story, they're likely going to cover you again because it's seen a lot of traction. So making sure that you're amplifying that as well.
So what makes a good story? We're going to forget about the raise for a minute. If we're talking about a story that you want to reach out to proactively to talk about as a founder, maybe it has to do with the industry that you're in. Timely and relevance is number one. Journalists work in news cycles. So, if you pitch me today about something about COVID, I'd be like, you are 2 years too late, right? I have moved on to Trump and I have moved on to tariffs. So, media aren't always looking to promote you most of the time. They want to engage their audience and inform their audience. So how do you become helpful to help them do their job and just help them do that? I think one good example, especially if you're thinking about product announcements, say you're a fintech company, you want to announce something, a new product that's helping accounting, doing it in July in the summer when everyone's off isn't great, right? That's not very timely, but doing it in tax season would be a smart move, right? So think about the calendar, think about what journalists are always focused on, and find your ways to slot into those stories and into those calendars. Another one is a strong take or POV. I think it really depends on what stage you're at in your company and how spicy you want to be. But one of my favorite former clients ever worked in electric transit and really wanted to change the way that people saw public transit and trains and turn it into hydrogen powered, and nobody really believed it, right? But she was quite spicy, was open to going against what Doug Ford was saying, or, at the time what Trudeau was saying. And that bought her a lot of clout with media, to the point that media were starting to come back to her as an expert without having her to go to them. So having that strong take or point of view, make sure that you're not just talking with the status quo, right? So think about what that is for you and how it applies to your company, but there should be something in there that I think you can be strong about that will make a good story and a journalist interested. Access to the founder is another one. I think sometimes we'll have clients come to us and we're like, we really want PR, but the founder is way too busy. Well, 9 out of 10 times, the journalist is not going to want to talk to your, junior product designer, right? Just because he's available, just because he's been from the company from the ground up, they're going to want to know the founder story. They're going to want to know the face to the company, which 9 out of 10 times is that founder, is that CEO, is that executive. So making sure that that is sort of checked off before you start pitching that story, super important. Another bonus is customer stories. So we talk about this till the cows come home with our clients. Any customers that you have already that can become influential advocates for you in these third-party validation moments, i.e. the media, are extremely, extremely strong. Ultimately, it's one thing for you to wave your flag and say, I'm really good and we're doing a really good job at this company and we're solving all these problems. It's even better when a client and customer of yours says, they helped me solve this. They've saved X amount of time for me on this. And so think about that as you're starting to build your customer base. Who is that influential advocate? Would they ever advocate for me in a media interview? Could they be a part of my story? That would be something to hold on to. And then even look at it from a case study perspective. Is it on your website? Is it somebody who can speak to the media, or is it something that's just accessible for media to see as that proof point? And then data. I mean, we've been talking about this all day long, but the more data that you can have, the better. Your internal data can be quite helpful, always better when paired with third party. So, take a look at StatsCan. StatsCan has a schedule that they release on a weekly basis. There'll be mainstay reports on there, but there'll be net new reports that they've been looking at for years. Is there a way that you can look at that data report that StatsCan put out from a national perspective? And do you have internal data that complements it or goes against it? That's something that would make a really good story and a journalist would really eat up. And then ultimately asking, why should they care, right? If I have to read a pitch and I think my team this all the time, this is a great pitch, but why would I care, right? You need to really be asking yourself that question. And if the story that you want to tell doesn't clearly answer that, go back to the top of this list and start again, really. And then the 5 R's of creating a good pitch. So say you've got all those things in mind, say you have your reporter in mind, you figured out who that person is that's going to tell your story, or that you really want to talk to them about something that they've been covering. This is a really simple way to be putting that email together. And it isn't really rocket science, I promise. But really your first paragraph of the pitch should try to establish a relationship with that journalist. So let's go back to those call outs. Maybe you saw that call out and you go, hey, Vindhya, know you're reporting on this story for the Toronto Star, saw you're called out. I think I'd be a good person to talk to this. Making sure that their name is spelled correctly is number one. That is like a fireable offense in journalism. So if you can't do it, they won't be happy. And then complimenting any other previous work. Finding those ways to just have like a natural human touch point and not just saying, hey, you should talk to me is going to go a long way with a very busy journalist. And then get specific about your idea. So what is the idea? Why is it a perfect fit for the Toronto Star? What is it about the story that you think really fits their beat? And doing so in a very concise manner. As a journalist who got hundreds of thousands of emails a day from people pitching me, some of my now colleagues, the shorter the better. I didn't have time. I had a pitch meeting in 30 minutes. I wanted to know the story and I wanted to know if you were available. So inserting any of those data points, any key trends that support your angle, if there's any sources that it's available. So maybe it's not you, maybe it's that influential customer advocate that can be that better source for this journalist. Put it in there, make it clear, and then always sort of end with a question. Want to try to request a response. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but we always say, is this of interest or is this something you're interested in? And hopefully that starts that dialogue with that reporter. Mistakes to avoid in PR. So we call it spray and pray pitching, which is where basically you've written a pitch and you just change the name out and you send it to everybody on your contact list and hope somebody responds. It's kind of like the hinge of doing PR. You don't want to assume that everybody's going to respond to you. So don't do that. Personalize, find your top 5 reporters and find a way to make it a little bit different for them. Maybe they've already covered something similar. Maybe it's the first time that they're going to hear this story. Do not just send it to 50 people. You will get very angry responses, if nothing at all. Don't send anything with no clear news hook. I think we've kind of gone over that, but just saying I'm a cool company and I'm doing cool things is not going to get you that far. Why is it relevant? Why is it timely? What does it have to do with their coverage? What idea do you have to push their coverage to the next level? A story that's not a fit for journalist beat is another one. So pitching a personal finance reporter, something about agriculture is probably not going to go very far in her inbox, right? And so as you're getting to know these reporters and you have them on LinkedIn, all reporters will have an author page on the website. It'll go over what their beat is, what they've been covering, even sometimes what they're interested in, which goes beyond what they're covering, which is another way in. Make sure that it fits their beat before you send it. And then not respecting deadlines. So, if they ask you for something, they are interested in an interview for you, you finally succeeded, and they say, okay, I need to talk to you by tomorrow. My deadline is end of day. That is the number one way to piss off a journalist, is say, I have all of these things available to you, but I'm not available today. Make sure that you can be flexible to their timelines and their way of working. And then you begin to sort of build an allyship between you and the reporter to sort of meet them where they're at. And then not following up, but not too much. So our sort of golden rule of thumb is wait a day at the very least. 2 is good as well, depending on how timely the news is. But following up like 4 hours later, you're probably going to get blocked. So wait at least a day and then try again. And then our biggest rule tip there too is like, what else can you offer them in that follow-up? It's not just, hey, Vindia, did you see this? It's, hey, Vindia, no, you haven't responded right now. I also saw this new report that I think would be, a great addition to the story that I'm wanting to tell. Or I just had a customer tell me that they experienced, this as a result of tariffs. I think that they'd be the perfect person for you to speak to. That goes a long way as well.
Too, we often say that we're at the mercy of the media, and I think it goes to respecting the deadlines. And also, if even in it's like we say our client's available, that's frustrating on us when they're actually not available and they're like, we can talk next week, and that just doesn't work. Like, we have to respect their deadlines. They are very, very busy professionals. So just making sure that you're getting them everything that they need and being the most helpful is where they will respect you and want to cover you again in the future. Okay, in terms of where else to share your story, we've talked a lot about LinkedIn. The new way is also podcasts. I know TechAlliance has a great podcast as well for anyone that hasn't been on that, but I think that that is a great forum for longer form content. You can share your stories there. Like, we are often even pitching podcasts for our clients to be on there. And it really depends on, maybe there's a marketing podcast you want, another tech podcast. BetaKit has a great one. So not looking outside of just traditional media is also important. And then speaking engagement, I think, if you want to really be seen as a thought leader, looking at what are some of those industry conferences, like we do the PR for Elevate, we were just at Web Summit in Vancouver, like anywhere that you can get out there, share your story, share what your product or service does, that's super important. So continue to look at those. Great. Okay. Well, we'll get into a couple of case studies. So this is an example of a prop tech company. Do you want to take this?
Yeah, I can do it. This is my client, so I should probably be the one to take it. But yes, Zone is a prop tech company based in Toronto. They really help first-time homebuyers and sellers, mainly with down payment assistance, but they are kind of becoming a one-stop shop when it comes to first-time home buying and first-time selling. And so they really came to us. Post raise, they had done a bit of PR, but they have kind of gone off the radar, which is not something that we would recommend. So it's like the moment you have that raise, you should be riding that wave of that momentum of coverage and finding more avenues to get into the media. They kind of stopped. And so they came to us and were like, we need to get into more tech publications, more mainstream, but we want to focus on our founder as a thought leader when it comes to the real estate market. And so we really helped the founder, Richard, develop his profile as a housing expert. We did a data report with them down the line, but even before doing that data report, off the back of the industry trends and sort of insights that he was able to provide us by staying up to date with the industry, we were able to craft, really succinct, detailed pitches that landed him on BNN Bloomberg and in Daily Hive. And later the data report that we did around first-time home buying sentiments had CP24 and National Post calling him, trying to get his insights. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, both on like the thought leadership side, trying to build him into a housing expert, but also using data as a leverage to show, why he's wanting to be a housing expert and why Zone is the solution to some of it. Another one. Okay, the Canadian Food Innovation Network. So they came to us. This is a big data story. They came to us after having collected data about Canadian food tech companies in many different facets over the course of a year. So it was a big, meaty, gorgeous report, the kind they get to download as a PDF when you search for it. And so their main objective was to just basically create awareness around Canada's food tech, both strengths on a global stage, but also position its CEO as an expert in this space. And so with the data report as sort of our overall hook, we also started to face a bunch of issues. Tariffs just started when we were about to launch this. There was a ton of political unrest. We were like, holy hell, how are we going to break through food tech while the world is a little bit on fire, right? And so we used the data and we used the sentiments of what it means to have food tech in a great place on a global stage economically as a way to talk about how this could offset some of the issues that we were seeing with tariffs. And so we used some of that relevancy while we were pitching up the data report to get media interested into the why behind the importance of some of the results in this. And it landed us a litany of coverage from BNN to CP24, Global News, and tons of trades. You would be shocked how many small food tech, food agriculture media outlets there are out there. There's more than I can count on two hands. But that's exactly where their customers are. That's the kind of outlets that, you know, their clients are reading. And so getting involved in those outlets was just as important to them as was getting on BNN because they knew where their audience was. And then Loop. So Loop is I'm sure people in this room know what Loop is, but a pretty rapidly growing fintech company. This is an example of a fundraise announcement we did with them. And so this was sort of their second funding round. And again, one of those folks who had come to us having stopped PR, wanting to bring PR back into the fold and build a little buzz again. And so really we were just able to reinforce its market leadership through this raise, talk about its rapid growth, emphasize, you know, what they were doing to simplify global financial problems. And again, you're seeing these like tried and true outlets on here when it comes to like fintech.ca and the logic and BetaKit. But we were able to then take that raise and that momentum and start to pitch the founder Cato on some open banking trends to get him onto CP24. And so we were riding that wave after that announcement into some other mainstream coverage that had more relevancy to what people were talking about.
So we always like to take or have a few takeaways that you can go home with. So first step is, if you haven't already, write your founder story, make sure you have a bio on yourself, post that story on LinkedIn, start reading your industry news, start following 3 to 4 journalists that cover your niche and connect with them on LinkedIn. Send them a DM, you can do it. And then also just build your PR toolkit. But really the most important thing out of any PR is just sharing your story. Like, I know that sometimes it feels, again, cringe, but just get out there, start sharing it. There's multiple platforms that you can do that on. And yeah, thank you so much for having us. Any questions?
Yeah, so I think we're certainly going to take some questions. I have a burning question. I love the fact that you gave positive case studies. Is there anything that you've seen, even, I know, I feel like a jerk. Like I think of a founder that I have enjoyed her incredible story and how public she was about the rise and the fall, and how it felt like media chewed her up and her rebound. We might know the same story, but I'm really curious if you can talk to us about when the fall happens and someone doesn't rebound, or when the fall happens and they do rebound, and what it took to get there, because that takes a bit of grit, right? Start with that. I know our team has different questions, but I was really excited about that one.
And I think that is such a great point. I think, again, everything is not, your founder journey is not just sunshine and rainbows. We know that. And I think that any good story, I think we even have a client right now that is in kind of like the online retail space or car space. They, had a great raise. They were expanding, and then they actually had to let a lot of people go. And they thought they weren't going to be a company anymore, to be honest. And then they started to kind of go up in the up again. They share that. They go to, events, they share that story. So it doesn't always need to be positive, for sure. Like sharing your trials and tribulations, that is super important. I think it's, how are you going to get there, and what is your vision on what that is? But there is something we said about a story in adversary and sharing that as well.
So I think it's sharing the truth, but like having that positive spin, right? We don't want to go on to or speak to a journalist and complain and whine and bitch and moan about how hard it is to be a founder, even though that's true. But understanding your challenges and being transparent and human about those challenges, but finding the positive in it is, I think, what the person we're speaking of as well is, how they shared that story to turn it into sort of like a heroism story. And so we say that even on general media training with clients is like anything that's said to you negatively or anything that you do want to say negative, always find a way to bridge it back to something positive. And that's just kind of like a rule of thumb for everything.
And you always just want to be, at the end of the day, in what we say in crisis comms too, is being transparent. You want to be transparent. You want to be authentic. You want to be you, really. And so, sharing that, and I think that example is a perfect one. And, we've seen a lot of companies do mass layoffs recently as well, and how some people have fumbled that from a PR perspective on how that rolls out. But there is, companies and CEOs and founders that say, I am coming from a human element. You're ultimately impacting people's life. And I think that if you can be true and authentic and human and share that within your story and be transparent is the biggest thing in PR. Oh yeah. 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 Mm-hmm.
Which was real, but it was like a small paid at like opponent to like a top 10 list or something.
Yes.
And so what are your thoughts on that? Because it seems like that's really popular as well. And how do founders approach that, and how do you vet authentic?
Yeah.
Like being approached to be on a podcast. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is something that we deal with all the time. Like I would say, like we take an earned media approach to it. Your ad buy strategy and your PR strategy should feed in together in terms of the stories that you are saying. And so again, it kind of goes back to that saying of like, an advertisement is you telling people you're good versus PR, third party credibility. And so it really depends. Like there is definitely opportunities, like awards is a perfect example where like those are bought and paid for. Like usually like you're submitting and that kind of thing. So it really depends on like what the opportunity is. Any PR agency is coming saying like, I'm going to guarantee you hits, like it's just, you should avoid at all costs. And so anything that is, sponsored or paid, that is more advertorial too. There's still merit in sharing your story that way, for sure, if you can get in. It's just, nothing in PR is ever guaranteed, because why you're saying it's earned media is because you're actually earning it because you have a good story, your point of view, or an expert commentary on it.
I think the one thing to think about is I think we're getting smarter as audiences as well. Like you click on a link and you think that it's an article and you're like, oh shit, it's sponsored. Do you read it? Do you finish it? 9 out of 10 times you don't, right? So think about you as the reader as well. I mean, if it's something that you're using advertorial, like you said, to be maybe putting in investor decks, or, to be thinking about it from like a different methodology. But if you're looking for a regular audience member to see you as credible and, wanting to buy from you, sometimes that sponsored or slash sponsored link isn't going to do you as well as like a real, true earned piece. Yeah.
And I'm a marketing specialist at Take 5 Digital. We are a production company here in London, and we just repositioned another brand of ours, Gotham Studios, and we're launching something pretty soon next week. So you heard it here first. But my question was, how do you find, so you hinted upon it by saying, look at your competitors, but how do you find these media sources and the correct places to advertise? Very simple question, but I'm a little lost on where to, who to reach out to, which reporters to approach.
Really start with, you want to look at one, who's writing about your competitors. Like it'll have like written by Chantel Cassar, right? So you can actually go to the contact us page and you'll also see a masthead on all the different reporters, beats, editors that are there. And so often have the contact information in that too. And so that is really a great place to start. We invest in tools like Meltwater that have a database of journalists from US, Canada, internationally. So that helps us on that side. And then I also think it's, again, we use a lot of searching in Google. We search on LinkedIn for different, I mean, we have a good sense of who they are at this point, but when you are starting, I think it's, again, looking at who would you like to write about you? And then looking at that reporter and then finding it on the contact us. I would say PR people are like mini private investigators. If we can find any contact, we can find any contact information at this point.
No, I was gonna say when I started in PR and I came as a journalist and I joined the Slack, there was a Slack called Media Updates and it was like everybody's favorite food, dog, tweet about where they've moved. And I was like, oh my God, you guys are keeping tabs on us. But you have to, right? Because beats change so often. Reporters, it's all very incestuous. They are going from one mainstream outlet to another. And so you kind of have to be that hungry to make sure that they are still the right person for you.
And oftentimes, like I would say, finding the email is the hardest part, but like a global or a CTV, they'll have the same, like it'll be, John Smith at tv.ca. And so you can kind of follow the naming formula from there. Yeah. Tip.
Yell.
I have a quick question. You briefly talked about backlinks when you're asking the media coverage to. Is this a question that is a bit taboo to ask, or is it because I sometimes think that am I supposed to pay for that if they reached out to me to make a comment, for example? Is it okay for me to be like, hey, could you, Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you from a journalist perspective, for one, most of the time, a backlink to a company's website was not going to make it past my editor's desk. That comes across as inherently promotional. There were some parameters around including it. If you had the data report backlinked to your website and I'm referring to the data report, then I'm backlinking your website, right? But in a promotional aspect, 9 out of 10 times that's not going to happen. In terms of asking for it, I think if they've come to you and they're asking for your comment or want you to be a part of something, there's no harm in asking. Just recognizing that it's probably a 9 out of 10 times a no. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious on the tariffs issues you were talking about before, mainly on the services side instead of the goods. As involved in software and in healthcare, there are times when, is it US or Canadian? Have you been exposed to that now with this, the ability to more Canada now? I know the Premier was kind of pushing away from American sourced software to maybe pushing more on the Canadian end. So I just wondered if you were involved or you were exposed to any of that. Are there software companies that are trying to use that as a boost? Yeah.
Hammer on Canada now. I want my customer base in Canada to hear from me in Canada and Canadian publications. And I think that that's a little bit from the Buy Canada movement. I mean, we've even had a client of ours create one of those scan apps that you can make sure that you're buying Canadian goods when you're in the grocery store. And so for part of it is clients and companies coming to us regardless of their industry and saying, okay, this is the audience that I know I need to get in front of because we're doubling down from a consumer perspective on Canada. And then the other side of it is them having some sort of campaign moment that they want to make out of this Buy Canada movement. And so the app is one example, but there's different sort of out of home and marketing strategies that PR can play a part in that has kind of been capitalized off of that. We still have some founders coming to us asking us for US traction and US PR, but really since the tariff stuff, it has been way less and less. We're predominantly working with Canadian founders based here in Canada across many provinces, and that interest in US PR is kind of dwindling. Yeah.
Year for releasing something. What is your suggestion on, you've planned ahead, you're announcing something and you become a victim of, something coming across from a bigger organization that's going to suck up the news cycle and it's out of your control. Do you, and what you're launching is timely, like it's has an immediate, not an evergreen effect. Do you delay it? Do you sort of change that? Do you wait out the ride, or do you still hope that maybe something smaller local still gets picked up in that mix? How do you balance that? And I know it's out of your control sometimes.
If the CN Tower is going to light on fire, we're not going to be able to get you any coverage because that is what everyone's going to be reporting on. And, even I remember I had a client during when COVID started to get announced, they had this amazing data report, they were rebranding, and we had so many embargo acceptances and people were going to cover it. And then it was like March 13th and, they had announced it and no one covered it. Like it was just so unfortunate. And so, oftentimes you cannot predict those types of things. Even from our side, we try to be as strategic as possible in terms of timing. And when that lands, it's just, sometimes it could be a very slow news day and you can get 100 hits. And sometimes you could have the best data report story ever and you can get 1 or 2 hits. So it is very hard to judge on what that is. I think that we're also living this right now in terms of the summer holiday season, is that everyone's like, we need to get a bunch of raise announcements out and like before Canada Day. And we're like, okay, not everyone all at once. And it's also Toronto Tech Week. And, yeah, so I think a lot of people think, particularly for launches too, you want to look at your consumer and when they're going to be buying, purchasing, is that in the summer? Is it in the fall? And so being strategic with your launches then too, but even for PR in the summer, like, of course, journalists go on vacation too, but also PR, some people pull back on PR and they're not telling stories. So there's a big opportunity because they need some content or interview sources as well. So, thinking it from that end as well. And then also, in the fall, you're also competing against different other competitors launching products or events that media may get off. So, we kind of look at what's happening, but again, very hard to predict.
Yeah, I mean, there might be something one day that comes in the way, and that's just the kind of reality of things. But one other thing I was added was that's where your relationships come into play. So, if you had been planning to pitch out this announcement, and yeah, the CN Tower lights on fire, of the 10 people that you had in your list, who are those 2 people that you have like engaged with a ton of time? Can you be the one to say, look, I know shit is going on right now, but like, what is the likelihood that you will cover this with everything happening? And you might have a better gauge of if you might need to shift that, right? So like those 4 key pointers about building those relationships and having them early, that's where it can kind of be a saving grace of how you think about that strategically too.
Depends on, obviously something that's very mainstream, like COVID is going to affect, but trade publications are not writing about that. So that doesn't really affect them. So how can you just shift your focus elsewhere that, their attention's not getting diverted? Yeah. Mhm. Totally, yeah. And I would say even, we have a debt client and oftentimes they'll get featured in some of the smaller publications, but you'll have a journalist that is looking for a licensed insolvency trustee and that's coming up as a news section and they'll get a lot of inbound requests from there. I think particularly in the broadcast space, you can probably speak better to this, but they're often at competition with each other. And so they see, CTV is covering it. Well, and it's getting a lot of traction is how do we, share that story, but also take a different angle or hook or find a different source to share that as well. And so there is, competition. I think that we even sometimes approach things and we'll often hear like embargo strategy, which is like you're sharing the news in advance before it actually goes live and you're giving all journalists a fair chance at sharing that news. You hope that they respect the embargo and share that, but if you maybe don't include a top target in that and someone else sees it and they're like, well, why weren't we included in this announcement? And so there is a bit of competition in terms of that, or you can take more of an exclusive approach too and go that way.
That's awesome. I know we're getting close to time. I saw your hand go up a little bit, Adam, but maybe chat with Chantel and Rachel afterwards. I know Adam had some questions about podcasts and he's an incredible human being. So I encourage you to chat with him. When you were talking a little bit about the advice and the question of like, do you delay when the CN Tower is on fire? A very recent example that we faced, our brand engagement team is supporting a company with their press release and putting it on a national newswire. And our advice to them was, hey, so like there's going to be an announcement by Trump tomorrow on Liberation Day or something around, who can keep track of it? But we were at the time and we said, don't do this. Like it doesn't matter that you've put the embargo. Let's just delay it one day. There was an agreement and we all agreed to put it out one day later, but then they preemptively did some work and we're like, okay, well, let's just see how this rolls. And it's hard. I'm sure you see this from time to time in your capacity of where you're giving the very best advice you can. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So, if there are questions from the audience and you are curious about the work that we can do on your behalf, feel free to ask us. Approach Frida and our venture growth team, and we'll do the best we can to navigate. Certainly not with the expertise that you have shared today. And I want to offer my sincere gratitude for you coming up the highway and spending some time with us today. It's a rainy day, so at least you might not be thinking about the patio you could have been on if you're at home already. Yeah. And I'm sure you feel the same way. The sentiment is such that if you joined us today, I feel like you're among the lucky few who had insight that just can't be found really quickly in a ChatGPT, but hearing case examples and seeing from, inside the beat and the experiences that others have had, particularly in tech, and to be able to acknowledge the things that are shared today and how they will support you in telling your story, getting your narrative out, fostering those relationships. There were so many things that made such good common sense on your slides, but it's a good thing to be reminded that that common sense is also about the business and focusing on relationships and credibility. So for the work that we've done together and the folks that we have in common, I loved that you shared Erin's story. She was a Smashing Barriers speaker for us, and I think she came before baby number 2. And the way that you've shared her story in your slide deck, it's so synonymous with the way that she shares her story, and to know that there's that connection is so neat. So on behalf of all of us in the room and this ecosystem, thank you for sharing your smarts today, and I can't wait to see you the next time.